So one of the questions that I was asked was, in our highly advanced society, if the church is not a building but a gathering of people, is virtual church a gathering, a fellowship of people? I love this question. One, because I received the question the week after I preached a sermon in which I was talking about the church being a gathering. The word ecclesia used in the New Testament for church is a word that means gathering, and that is what the church is. So it shows me that the person asking this question was paying attention to my sermon, which is nice. And they were asking about the fact that we are able now in our advanced society to have gatherings that are not necessarily in person, but are virtual. And is it possible for the church to be virtual in that sense? My answer to that question is yes, perhaps. And let me qualify that. I do think that it is possible to have a virtual gathering, to have a virtual church. However, I don't think that most churches are quite there yet. We do obviously have online worship. You can watch the service online. You can worship online. You can listen to the preaching online. That, for us and for most churches, isn't quite the same thing as having a gathering where you come together with other people, where there is genuine interaction, where there is mutual accountability, mutual support. You're really missing out on that when all you're doing is watching the service online. And that's not to take anything away from those who watch online. I'm glad that you do, and I hope that you continue. And it's great for those who cannot physically gather together. But how is it that we foster that sense of community, that sense of being gathered and being a part of a community when we are not in person? I do think it's possible to do that, and let me tell you why. We have, in my family, 4 boys who are between the ages of 16 and 21. And those 4 boys play a lot together, not just with one another, but with their other friends. And when I say that they play a lot together, I don't mean that they're sitting around a table together playing a game. They're playing together online. And oftentimes almost always not in the same room, sometimes not even in the same house. But even if they are in the same house, they're in separate rooms with their doors closed, and yet they're playing together. They are fellowshipping together because they're doing it in this online game where they're able to hear each other, they're able to speak to each other, they're able to communicate and have those conversations. And I think that is, they are developing genuine friendships in that setting. That is a virtual community where they are gathering together. That's not quite the same thing that we have when you're watching a worship service online, where it's just you watching. When they're playing games, they're not just sitting at their screen watching the same thing that everybody else is watching. They're actually interacting with one another and supporting one another and developing those relationships. So how do we do that as a church? And I think that that's the next step of figuring out how we do virtual church and figuring out how we create those virtual spaces where people can not just be watching worship all at the same time in their separate homes, but actually worshiping together, having a virtual space where they can come together, where they can hear each other, where they can speak to each other and be heard and develop relationships with one another, even when they're not able to be in the same room. I think that there are some churches that are doing this, that are creating virtual spaces, even VR spaces where people can gather together and worship, even when they're in separate houses. But I really think that is a step that we need to take in order to make it actual community, because when we're just watching the screen on our own, we're not getting that same sense of community. We're not getting that sense of fellowship, that sense that there's going to be somebody there to pray with you when you go to the hospital, that there's somebody that knows what's going on in your life and is praying for you and is giving you advice and is walking with you. And that is what the gathering is about. That is what the ecclesia is about. And yes, I think we can do that virtually, but I'm not sure that we're there yet. I hope that we take that next step so that we can meet people where they are, and the church can go truly to all the corners of the world.